The Dodgers are playing the Yankees in the World Series, and to get you ready, I am talking with Stacy Gotsulias from Locked On Yankees, crossover preview to get you ready for the World Series. Let's do it.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a special crossover edition of Locked On Yankees
and Locked On Dodgers,
both of which are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm Stacy Gotsulias.
And I'm Jeff Snyder.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube from the background and seeing two of our two lovely faces on your screen, this is a special crossover edition of Locked On Yankees and Dodgers because our two teams are in the World Series.
Are you serious? What fortuitous timing of this crossover.
Wow, amazing. Before we get started with this special crossover, don't forget, subscribe to both Locked On Dodgers and Locked On Yankees on whichever podcasting platform you prefer. Subscribe to our channels on YouTube, like our videos, hit the bell so you're notified when our videos go live. So this is basically just us talking about the World Series. Jeff will let us know about Dodgers stuff we need to know about. I'll let the Dodgers fans know about what they need to know about with the Yankees.
Because hardly anybody knows anything about either of these two teams. These two obscure random teams in the World Series.
Yeah. But these two underdog, gritty teams.
It's nice to see the little guy succeed once in a while,
Yeah. It's about time the little guys made it to the World Series. So let's briefly talk about the history. How well do you remember the 81 World Series?
I was only 4 years old, so I only know it from highlight videos and the memories of my family. I was in a huge Dodger family, so my family remembers it well, but the first thing I remember is Jack Clark and Ozzie Smith hitting home runs off the Dodgers in the 1985 NLCS. That's my earliest postseason baseball memories.
Yeah, see, I was 7. And I cried myself to sleep when I heard on the radio that the Yankees lost because I knew that wasn't a good thing. So that's my memory.
I was the Dodgers lost to the Yankees in the first two World Series of my life in 1977 and 78. And my mom still has a hard time understanding why I don't hate the Yankees because she became a Dodger fan when she married into a Dodger family. And so it was all Dodgers Yankees throughout the 70s and early 80s. And so she hates the Yankees. I'm like, I don't know. They're just another team to me. So,
right.
Because it's been a long time. It's been a long time since they've played in a meaningful game against each other.
Right. And it's funny because fans of other teams are making it seem as if this happens all the time when it's been 43 years. I joked about this on the show a couple days ago. Physical by Olivia Newton-John was on the charts the last time the Yankees and Dodgers played in a World Series. And it's just amusing to me how angry this matchup is making other fan bases.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. I'm trying to think of a good analogy that something that has happened a lot in history. And if it happened again right now, if people said this all happens all the time, you'd think, no, it doesn't. Like meteors hitting the earth and destroying all life forms. Like, I'm sure that's happened a lot of times in the history of the world. We'd still be surprised if it happened right now, because it's been a long time. And 43 years is a long time. There are a lot of people watching or listening to this episode of this crossover podcast who were not alive, who this has never happened in their lifetimes. My wife, who, this is the first time Dodgers Yankees have ever played in her lifetime. Yeah, it's the fourth in my lifetime, which makes me feel like I married somebody a lot younger than me. She's only 5 years younger than me. It's just that for the first part of my lifetime, it was all the time. But 43 years is a long time. You think there's probably been at least 35 different unique matchups in the World Series since then, probably even more than that. I trying to think of what repeats there are. I assume the Yankees and Braves played each other a couple times.
Yep.
I can't even think. Yankees, is that the only repeat in the last 43 years?
Red Sox Cardinals were 07 and 2013.
Yep.
Yeah. But other than that,
there's been probably close to 40 different matchups since the last time it was Dodgers Yankees. That's a lot. There's only 30 teams.
Yeah. So how are you feeling going into this? And also, are you feeling the same way I'm feeling? I understand why the break was so long, because if Cleveland had gone 7 games, it wouldn't have ended until I think Tuesday. But this break feels so long to me.
It does. And, both of our teams already dealt with a long break before the division series. Obviously, both of our teams survived that break, which hasn't been the case the last few years necessarily. As a fan, it's excruciating, but for me, knowing about Freddie Freeman's ankle and the Dodgers bullpen and everything, it's very welcome to me knowing that the team needs it. And so I'm willing to set aside my personal needs of baseball to watch for the greater good of having the Dodgers a little bit healthier for the World Series. But yeah, even scheduling 2 off days, because even if the Yankees Guardians had gone 7 games, there still would have been 2 days off. I think I'd prefer only 1 day off maximum between series but I also get, because for TV reasons, they stagger the series. So it wouldn't necessarily be fair if the Dodgers got 2 days off and the Yankees got 1 day off. Right. So by saying everybody gets at least 2 days off, that gives every team a little bit of a chance to set the rotation, everything. What I'm happy about is that we get to see the number 1 starters in game 1. Yes. That's not the case in the championship series necessarily. The Dodgers didn't have, their rotation, because they went 5 games with the Padres and then had 1 day off. It's like, okay, now we're pitching whoever's available. And so I do like that they set it up so the World Series can be kind of the best against the best. And there's not going to be any excuses, or excuses probably isn't the right word, but it's a very fair matchup the way it's set up with all this time off. And I think I appreciate that. And I think it's worth the excruciating time off for us as fans.
One, I'm glad I'm not the only person who struggles with the word series and trying to pluralize it, because it doesn't make sense to me. And 2, I agree, because our bullpen, specifically a few arms of the bullpen, have been used a lot. So, and these are guys who haven't been in this position before. So I'm also glad for those days off. But personally, I'm not enjoying it. It's just too long for me, and I want baseball to start.
Especially for those of us who do daily podcasts. It's like, hey, you know how you do a podcast every weekday? Guess what? No baseball to talk about on the weekdays. Then on the weekend, then you could do extra podcasts to talk about the games. But also one of my big pet peeves is the media complaining about games being too long and stuff because they want to go home. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to make this about the podcaster angle. And I'm just going to focus on the fact that hopefully Freddie Freeman's ankle will feel better by Friday.
Look, I'm happy because my team wasn't even in anything last October, and that was very strange for me. It was the first time in the 6 years that I've been hosting this show that I didn't have at least a playoff game, like a wild card game or a series to talk about, and it was difficult. Steve and I came up with things to talk about last year, but we actually ended up talking about other playoff games because the Yankees weren't in it, so that kind of helped. But yeah, these last few days without baseball have been, Brian and I were talking about in the 3rd segment yesterday about how rude it is when people schedule weddings in October.
Yeah, for me, it was my kids' fall break from school is always in mid-October. And so this was the 2nd time in the last 7 years that I have listened to the NLCS on the radio from beautiful central Utah instead of watching it on TV while the Dodgers are playing. And both times the Dodgers won that NLCS. And so it was all good. But yeah, this year we were completely out of reception. There was no internet reception and no television where we were. And so I would go sit in my car so I could listen on Sirius XM satellite radio to the games. And so sometimes I'd go and I'm just going to go listen to the game for an hour. Sometimes I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to go check the score and then come back, But yeah, it's sometimes life gets in the way of baseball, but I definitely feel you on maybe October should just be a national holiday month.
Honestly,
except then when our teams don't make it, or your team didn't make it last year, my team lost all 3 postseason games they played last year. Imagine, at least we had lives and school and work to take our mind off of
the disappointment
is baseball.
The disappointment, yeah. So coming up next, we're going to kind of, not that we don't know how each team is doing, but let's do sort of a scouting report and talk about certain players that maybe some Dodger fans don't really know about, because there are some players that most baseball fans are thinking to themselves, who is this guy, when they come out of the bullpen? So we're going to discuss that next. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Want to play Prize Picks alongside Drewski, Joe Budden, and MMA champ Sugar Sean O'Malley? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Don't forget, you can catch every pitch of your Dodgers hometown broadcast or Yankees hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search Dodgers or Yankees. So tell us, Jeff, tell us about all these, because you have a tremendous bullpen. You've been using them a lot because of injuries that have happened to your starting rotation. And just tell the Yankee fans about guys that they're, no offense, but Yankee fans are kind of insolent and we kind of stay in our bubble and we don't pay attention to things until we need to.
Yeah, it's the Dodgers. The bullpen is one of their strengths. Obviously, the offense is the big strength, but the bullpen is maybe the unexpected strength of the team because, like you said, the Dodgers have had a ton of injuries to their starting staff. You could take the Dodgers starting pitchers who are currently hurt and make a pretty good rotation out of it. And unfortunately, that means that they really only have roughly 3 starters that they can count on. And one of those is Walker Buehler, who was terrible most of the season, but has been pretty good here in the postseason and at the very end of the regular season. So you got Jack Flaherty, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and Walker Buehler. You need 4 starters in the postseason. It used to be the teams would try to get by with 3, and then they realize, wow, every time we have our #1 starter go on short rest, he's terrible. And it only took like 30 years for teams to figure out maybe we should stop doing that. And unfortunately for the Dodgers, the answer for them this year is, okay, 4th starter is a bullpen game. And so the bullpen has gotten a lot of use. There's a lot of guys in this bullpen who have been very successful in the past. There's a couple old guys, Blake Trinan and Daniel Hudson have both been closers, like very good closers at times in their career. Trinan is kind of the closer now. The Dodgers don't really have a closer because they also have Michael Kopech, who throws a zillion miles an hour and has been very good since coming to the Dodgers. Occasional command issues, but mostly really, really good. They have Evan Phillips, who was their closer, and then he had a rough stretch in the middle of the season and was really bad for about 3 weeks, and then just turned it around and was awesome again. So they've got a lot of guys with closing experience. One of the big question marks for the Dodgers is going to be, will Alex Vesia and or Brusdar Graterol be on the World Series roster? Because right now there is some low-hanging fruit. They've got, in the NLCS, they had a couple guys on the roster who probably didn't belong on a big league postseason roster. They had Edgardo Henriquez, who is 22 years old or whatever, hit 104 miles an hour in the minor leagues. Great stuff. Not ready for prime time. He absolutely, command-wise, is not ready and is not going to be used. If he's on the World Series roster, he will only be used in a blowout one way or the other. And there's not really room for a guy like that, a one-inning guy who's only going to be used in a blowout. You only have him on there if you don't have any better options. So the Dodgers are hoping to have Vesia and Graterol as those better options to bump Enriquez off the roster, and then maybe Landon Knack, who was maybe going to be their 4th starter. Then they tried him as like the bulk guy in a bullpen game, and he was really bad against the Mets. And so, he's a rookie. I think they're just not really willing to take a chance on him figuring it out in the World Series. So I would guess Enriquez and Knack both get bumped off the roster if Vesia and Graterol come back. And if so, then you've got the Trinan and Kopech and Phillips and Vesia and Anthony Bonda and Brusdar Graterol and Daniel Hudson. It's a pretty deep bullpen and a lot of guys who they trust in a lot of different situations. And, we saw Michael Kopech pitch in the third inning in an NLCS game because that was when the big part of the Mets lineup was coming up. And when you have three different really high leverage guys who you trust a lot, 3 or 4, you can just throw those guys at the best part of the lineup every time it comes around. And so, I wouldn't be surprised if the Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Giancarlo Stanton part of the lineup sees a lot of really good arms. The Dodgers just kind of throwing them at them as much as possible to try to see if you can neutralize those guys, then you have a much better chance of winning.
Right. Our bullpen we have a similar situation with Clay Holmes was the starter for a while. He was really terrible for a while and they kept bringing him out there and he kept blowing saves. He set a record for blowing saves. And then they switched to Luke Weaver, which is Luke Weaver literally came out of nowhere to do this. He had been on a number of teams as a starter. He wasn't the type of guy that you would think of. They picked him up at the end of 23 and he just stepped into this role. And other than that one blip against Cleveland has been so incredible in the closer's role. And watching him pitch, he's so thin and wiry, but he still throws the ball really hard. And it's just amazing to me watching him step into that role and do so well. So they have Holmes. They can bring him in earlier. He usually does better when they bring him in earlier. I think the pressure of the closer job got to him. He also doesn't have a lot of swing and miss stuff. He plays to contact a lot because of the way his ball drops. And I think it's better for Weaver to be in that position. But you have guys like Tim Hill and Jake Cousins, who were both, Tim Hill was DFA'd by the White Sox of all teams. And now he's pitching big moments for the Yankees. He pitched big moments for the Yankees in the ALCS, and now he's probably going to do the same in the World Series. And it's interesting to see how much the two teams have changed since their meeting in June. Dodgers won 2 out of 3 in that. Soto was hurt. Cole wasn't even pitching yet. You had guys like Victor Gonzalez and Caleb Ferguson in the bullpen. Oswaldo Cabrera pitched an inning in that blowout game on the Saturday game. Tyler Glasnow started the Sunday game for the Dodgers. So, there are some people who are bringing up that series to make it seem like a precursor or a preview of this. But both teams are so different now that, this series, I hope, as a baseball fan, I hope it goes the distance. As a Yankee fan with anxiety issues, I don't, because I don't know if I can handle 7 games between the Yankees and the Dodgers.
Yeah. I feel exactly the same way. Obviously, the reverse, but I'm hoping for a Dodgers sweep, and I hope none of the games are close because I am. It's been a stressful month. It's. I'm ready for that stress to be over. I hope it ends with the parade. But you mentioned Luke Weaver. It's kind of funny because in the chat on one of our live episodes the other day, somebody was throwing out the Dodgers hitters' stats against different Yankees pitchers and threw out Luke Weaver. I'm like, you can't use Luke Weaver because he's not the same guy who the Dodgers saw when he was pitching for the D-backs and trying to be a starter. And, it's a totally different Luke. It might as well literally be a different person now because and it's so funny to me, like how do you figure out who these guys are who are just going to turn into stud relievers? Because it's in Yankees history, you have Mariano Rivera, who was a bad starting pitcher, turned into a pretty decent reliever. On the Dodgers side, Eric Gagne, terrible starting pitcher, and then turned out pretty good. And it's like you look at some of these guys, like how many starting pitchers have there been who could have been dominant closers if they had just been switched to that role? If maybe the Yankees wouldn't have regretted Hideki Irabu so much if they had turned him into a closer, although the Yankees had a closer, but like I just have no idea how you figure those things out, because in the years of watching Luke Weaver pitch, I never would have thought that guy might turn into something really good, and then he did.
Yeah, especially he's 31 years old. He just turned 31. So he's been around the block. And as you said, these guys sometimes are terrible starters. And then as a closer, you have a different mindset. You know, you're only pitching to a certain, usually pitching to a certain number of guys. You can let it all go too. You can just throw the ball as hard as you want because you're not really going to tire yourself out if you're only pitching to 3 guys, 4 guys, maybe 5 guys if things get dicey. So yeah, there is definitely a different mindset. And to see him step into this role the way he has been incredible. Because as I said, Clay Holmes was the starter to start the year. He did pretty well. And then he just fell off a cliff. And people were wondering if it was going to be closer by committee, if they were going to use a number of guys, because there are a few guys who can close. You have Tommy Kahnle who can close out a game as well. And it's just, I love it. And Luke Weaver, if you don't know, is kind of strange and funny in his post-game interviews. And he's been one of those guys where you look forward to his post-game interviews because you don't quite know what he's going to say. So this has been a fun playoff run for Yankee fans. You know, I know you said it was stressful for you guys. The Cleveland series, even though it finished 4-1, was stressful because most of those games were close. They had to win in extra innings and stuff like that. But for the most part, when you look at how the Yankees have made it to the World Series, they've had a pretty easy time. They got
to play the Royals.
Yeah. You know, the Royals, who came out of nowhere to leapfrog over Minnesota, and then the Tigers did the same thing in order to play in the first round. So yeah, the AL playoffs were an interesting show.
Yeah, for sure. The AL Central getting 3 teams in on the basis of mostly just beating up on the White Sox extra. It's if they had a truly balanced schedule, the American League playoff field would have looked totally different because if everybody got to play the White Sox the same number of times, the Tigers and Royals probably both don't make the playoffs. But you know what? It's fun that this year the 2 best teams in baseball are, the best team in the National League is playing the best team in the American League and the World Series. I saw this is only the 3rd time this century that's happened.
Yep.
And that's, I knew it wasn't very often, and it's only about 25% of the time that the team with the best record in the regular season actually wins the World Series. And that's how Major League Baseball has designed this postseason setup they have. Still pretty wild that only 3 times this century have the 2 best teams actually made it through the gauntlet of the postseason tournament.
Yeah, the last time Red Sox Cardinals in 2013, they both were, I believe, 97 and 65. They actually finished with the same record, and they were both at the top of the AL and the NL. So coming up next, we'll talk about both teams have crazy ticket prices. I know we spoke about this on Locked On Yankees on Thursday's show, but we're going to talk about it again because it needs to be talked about. And we're going to give our predictions.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Did you say when you win your first $5 bet, Jeff? No, I said when you place your first $5 bet. You get $200 in bonus bets. It doesn't have to be a good bet. You don't have to win it. You place it and you get your $200 in bonus bets. Looking at the World Series options on FanDuel, there's a lot of fun stuff you can place bets on, either with your $5 bet or with your $200 in bonus bets. For example, which player will hit the most home runs in the 2024 World Series? Believe it or not, Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge are the 2 top options there. Shohei Ohtani is at plus 300. Judge is at plus 310. Then you got Stanton at plus 600, Soto at plus 750, Max Muncy at plus 1100, Teoscar Hernandez at plus 1300. Those odds like that sounds like a fun way to use your $200 in bonus bets because you can make a risky bet. And if you're right, boom, big winnings with your bonus bets. It only cost you $5 because all you had to do to get it was place a $5 bet. So do all of that. And where should you do it? At FanDuel.com.
So as I said, we're going to talk about ticket prices because I can't afford to go to the World Series. There are upper deck seats coming in on the low end at Yankee Stadium for Game 3 at $1,300. There's also this pinstripe pass where you get into the stadium, you don't have a seat, And that's also just above $1,300. And then the rest of the stadium, forget about it. You know, if I'm seeing tickets that are $1,100 for the bleachers, that's just way too much for me. And I think it's terrible that the normal fan can't get in, because I'm a normal fan. I have a normal paycheck. I don't get, you know, I'm not making like $250,000 a year at my job. And so it's not easy for me to be like, oh yeah, I'll just drop $2,400 on a ticket in the second deck at Yankee Stadium. How are the ticket prices out there?
It's very similar. I was looking at, it seems like they're a little bit more expensive at Yankee Stadium, but not bad. You know, I was telling Sully, I was on Locked On MLB the other day, and I was telling them about when my aunt and uncle took me to a Dodger game for my 11th birthday. And my nickname, what everybody called me growing up, was JJ. And we sat in these seats that were in row JJ. And they said it was because it was in honor of my birthday. We got to the seats and I realized, oh, this is because these are by far the cheapest tickets in the stadium. We had, at one point, a car alarm was going off in the parking lot. My uncle looked down, found his car, and made sure it wasn't his car going off, because we had a much better view of the parking lot than we did of the game. We were in literally the farthest you can be from the field and still be in the stadium.
That's funny.
Well, I'm looking right now, and there are tickets 10 rows in front of where I sat for my 11th birthday for $1,265 each. That's for the worst seats in the stadium, and it's $1,200, almost $1,300 per ticket. It's going to be interesting to see how the atmosphere is, because it's going to be entirely different people than we're at the division series games, and mostly different people than we're at the championship series game. Because, you know, if you, even people who can afford to do, you know, who can afford the World Series, maybe can't afford to do the World Series after having already done the NLCS or ALCS. You know, it's a lot of money, and so you've got your season ticket holders, who a lot of them will use their tickets, but also I think there's a lot of season ticket holders who just see dollar signs. A Yankees Dodgers matchup, I'm not going to these games. Why? I'll watch on TV and I'll make, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars selling my tickets. And so it's going to be a different kind of fan base in both stadiums. I'm interested to see if it changes the atmosphere, if it's, you know, less, not that rich people can't be baseball fans too,
right?
But, you know, maybe not as excited to be at a World Series game, but also maybe it adds to the excitement. Well, I shelled out $4,000 for this ticket. I might as well go crazy and be the most excited I've ever been in my life, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so let's do our predictions. I know what you want, because you said that last segment, but how do you honestly think this series is going to go?
You know, I am blinded by partisanship. You know, I am a Dodger fan first and foremost. I do think the Dodgers are a slightly better team than the Yankees. A lot of it's going to come down to the starting pitching, because, you know, it's a big question mark for the Dodgers. Jack Flaherty was great in this first game against the Mets and terrible in his second game. Which version of Jack Flaherty do we get? Because he's going to be going against Garrett Cole. And then on the flip side, can the Dodgers get to Cole? You know, I feel like game one, I wouldn't say it's a must win. I don't, you know, I believe must win is a mathematical equation and not an emotional feeling. But if the Dodgers could win game one, it definitely sets the tone for the series. But yeah, overall, because I do think the Dodgers are a slightly better team, I do think the Dodgers are going to win the series in, I guess, once I'm picking the Dodgers to win, I will let my emotions get into it a little bit. I'll say Dodgers in 6, because game 6 would be Fernando Valenzuela's 64th birthday. So winning it on Fernando's birthday, I'd rather have win it in 4 and do the parade on Fernando's birthday. That's what I'm hoping for. But, you know, I'll say Dodgers in 6, Dodgers in 7 wouldn't surprise me.
I'm going to agree and say Dodgers in 6.
Hey, look at this. All right, wrap it up. Don't even need to play the games. Let's get rid of the stress. Just hand over the piece of metal.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, and it's funny too, because I mean, obviously I'll be upset when the Yankees win, if the Yankees lose.
I like your attitude, Stace.
Yeah. Well, I have feelings, and I kind of know when things are going to happen, and I'm not going to be that upset. I'm happy they made the World Series. I know that Yankee fans are World Series or bust, World Series win or bust. But it's been 15 years. It's been fun watching this team in the playoffs. And, it'll be upsetting for about 5 minutes. And then we'll have to worry about whether or not they can sign Juan Soto to a big contract. So, the stress isn't going to end for Yankee fans if they lose, because they're going to be worried about that. And also, if they do lose, will that be more incentive for Juan Soto to stay so he can try and win a ring with the Yankees? So there's part of me.
Or to go to the team that just beat him in the World Series. Hey, come play with us, Juan.
Do you have any money to give him?
The Dodgers are making money on Ohtani's contract. It's already been a net positive for them. Dodgers print money. There's plenty of money to give to Juan Soto.
Yeah, that's funny because that's what people think about the Yankees. And yet Hal's kind of like, I don't know.
I'm interested to see because, he did kind of say we can't spend like this forever. And,
they can.
Juan Soto is a spend forever kind of free agent. So
they can.
He's not going to the Mets, though. Everybody thinks it's Yankees or Mets. He's not going to the Mets.
No, I don't think so. Oh, speaking of the Mets, let's just briefly, how did you feel about that series? Like, were you worried at any point because of how they were playing? Like, did you feel?
Yeah, I wasn't ever super worried. The Dodgers kind of blowing them out in game 1, even though game 2 was lousy and the Dodgers lost, it was, I never got too stressed about it because then the Dodgers won the next 2. It's 3-1. They lose game 5, but I guess the most stressful moment was realizing if Sean Manaea throws another gem in game 6, then suddenly it's down to a best of 1 series. Mm-hmm. As soon as they got to Manaea, I was, this is beautiful. The Dodgers knocking Sean Manaea out in the 3rd inning is when the Dodgers won that series.
Right.
And even getting the 2 runs in the 1st inning against Manaea, it's like, well, that's more than they got to him in game 2, the whole game. And so, I felt pretty good about it the whole time. And again, it was because, I obviously the Yankees are a better team than the Mets are, but the same kind of math. The Dodgers are better than the Mets, so I'd expect the Dodgers to win. And even though as a Dodger fan, I have way too much evidence over the last 12 years that the better team doesn't always win in a postseason series, it's still, the only way my brain knows how to work. And I am annoyingly optimistic when it comes to the Dodgers because like you said, there's plenty of time to be sad after the loss happens. There's no reason to lock in the sadness ahead of time. Just be optimistic, enjoy it. And then, if the loss comes, you can be sad then, but sometimes the loss never comes. Sometimes your team wins it all.
Right. And I just want to reiterate to Locked On Yankees fans, it's not, I wouldn't be surprised if the Yankees won the series, if it was a hard fought 6 or 7 game series. I'm not sitting here and saying the Yankees are going to lay down to the Dodgers. I just think the Dodgers have a bit of an edge. They were the best team in baseball, and I think they can probably win the series.
I hope you're right, and I hope your listeners don't judge you too harshly for that, for a realistic prediction.
Yeah, I'm being a realist. That's all there is. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers and Locked On Yankees your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Sully will cover the World Series for you every day, just like we all will. The link to Locked On MLB is in the description, so you don't need to search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you for joining us for this special crossover edition of Locked On Yankees and Locked On Dodgers. I'm Stacey Gotsoulias.
And I'm Jeff Snyder. Go Dodgers.
Go Yankees.